Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Muriel, and today I'm very happy to announce that we are reviving the Wyrm Words podcast. Yeah, I might as well call it a podcast, because when it comes to discussing literature and other forms of media, especially all things SFF, the more the merrier, at least that's what I believe. And so today I am joined with a very special guest, my lovely, wonderfully nerdy boyfriend, Christopher. So welcome, Christopher.
Hello.
We often discuss the books we're reading, the TV shows we're watching, the games we're playing. In fact, a cute little anecdote time. One of the first things we ever connected over was our shared love of Ursula K. Le Guin. And the first gift you ever gave me was a collection of her poetry. So that was very special. And you've also enjoyed some of the books I recommended to you, which made me very happy. So today we're going to do a book review together. But before we get into the meat of it, would you like to introduce yourself? Maybe share the kinds of things you like to read, the things that matter to you in literature, and maybe touch upon your own, what I like to call hierarchy of literary needs.
Okay, yes. So I'm Christopher from Ireland, and I enjoy a lot of fantasy and science fiction, speculative fiction mainly. I also went to university to study history, so I really love nonfiction stuff too. I like that kind of, meta approach to the fiction and the world building itself, and the focus on the world building and the histories. That's kind of what I'm there for.
Yeah, I mean, history and then political philosophy, like that informs a lot of the ways you read things. Just like, for instance, biology or feminism, mythology, that informs a lot the way I read a lot of things. Yeah, okay, so thanks for that. So today we're going to be reviewing this. Stand on Zanzibar, written by John Brunner. So this won the Hugo Award in 1968. So this was first, I think, published in the magazine New World. I don't know if it was serially published, though. I didn't verify that. But so that was in 1967, and then it was published as a full novel in 1968. And so I assume it won the Hugo Award for that year. Now, Stand on Zanzibar is a new wave dystopian novel. John Brunner, is he still alive? No, he passed away in 95. No. So he passed away in 95. So he was an English writer. And this book specifically focuses thematically heavily on overpopulation and its consequences. So to give an idea of the plot, and also, as expected for this kind of thing, we're not going to worry about spoilers. We're going to discuss every aspect of this book. So it takes place in 2010. There is a big overpopulation problem. In fact, the title refers to the idea that there are so many people on Earth that you could all fit them on the island of Zanzibar. I think that was it, right? Because that had been a quote.
Was originally there's a thing called the Rome Club in the 60s. Yes. It published a paper about overpopulation. It got a lot of people worried about it. The Population Bomb came out as a big book. I think it was a newspaper article that said if you took all the people in the world, you would and put them together, they could fit on the Isle of Man. Yes, and then John Brunner, as an exercise in his head, kind of charted forward. And I think in the article it said in the next 20 years we'd need the Isle of Wight to contain people.
Oh, right.
And then John Brunner went forward to that 2010 date at the kind of the theoretical maximum and put it in, and it's basically the island of Zanzibar.
Right.
We would need to, and then they have that bit at the end of the book where it comes back about the people, people having to stand with their ankles in the water now.
Yes,
the population continues to go up as
exactly. And you mentioned the Club of Rome, I think, because this is an important bit of context as well, because we'll be coming back to this in the world building and theming sections. So John Brunner wrote 4 novels I guess, in conversation with the ideas of the Club of Rome. Right? Because the quartet is called the Club of Rome Quartet.
Yeah, it
and
is.
So
it's inspired
and so each of those novels tackles a specific theme that I guess was of concern to the Club of Rome. So Stand on Zanzibar is overpopulation. We had looked this up. There's the Sheep Lookup, which is pollution and environmental degradation. The Shockwave Rider was, I can't remember already, but it was like tech.
Yeah, tech.
And then I can't remember the title of the fourth one, but that one was concerned with basically racism and the civil rights movement. So I've never really heard much about it. I have heard of the Shockwave Rider vaguely. I had not heard of the Sheep Lookup. So that was my knowledge of Stand on Zanzibar. Plot-wise, specifically, so it's the year 2010. We have two main characters. We have Norman. I'm usually terrible with character names, but so I don't remember the last names. But there is Norman, an African American gentleman. He is a junior VP at this big tech company that is the sole proprietor of this super advanced AI computer called Chalmaneser. And to make a long story short, his company is approached by a small African country.
No, I guess that reads. Well, I've just never said it out loud before. I've always said Shamalizer in my head. But I don't think that's actually, but that's I've.
No, that's okay.
That's okay. No, it never occurred to me. I'd never heard it spoken aloud.
And so they are approached by this small country called Benin, a country known for its lack of conflict with other countries around it. And this is seen as like a bit of an exception in Africa. But this country, the president is deeply concerned with the welfare of his people, but they are quite underdeveloped. And so they would like the help of this US corporation to basically develop their country, get infrastructure, education, etc.
And then the African states around them are... Like, there's the history of the African states around them that were carved up as independent colonies, kind of conglomerating around their kind of language groups or kind of larger identifiers. And the Beninians have resisted attempts to be absorbed into any of the groups who both would like to absorb them.
Because there is this whole thing, and it's developed in the story, that anytime there's an attempt to colonize them, people they lose their will to fight and be aggressive towards the Bedinians.
The folklore is that the Xinca, who are like the dominant ethnic group of the region, are kind of mystical or have some ability to steal the heart of warriors, this kind of thing.
And then, so Norman lives in New York, and Norman has a flatmate because overpopulation is a big concern with this book. Most people can no longer, especially if they don't have families, they don't live, no one has their own flat. Most people have roommates, flatmates. And so he lives with a man named Donald. Now, Donald is basically... He's paid to be a nerd, kind of, at the beginning. He's basically he's on retainer with the government. He's on hold. He's waiting to be activated. But in the meantime, he's basically paid to study a bunch of stuff, whatever interests him, and gather as much knowledge and analyze parallels between different fields. He's basically like a data analyst and a...
It's kind of like an retainer research institute, because another facet of his job he describes is kind of like noticing an interesting to take a look at what's happening in this academic field and say, hey, someone from biology should go look, maybe they can contribute to that engineering discussion over there. And then the university, goes and finds people to put together, a synthesizer.
Yes, that is what they call him, I think.
And that's I guess that's the idea, that he's synthesizing the information.
And so, keeping in mind that this doesn't really happen immediately, but to, again, make a long story short, he is eventually asked by the US government to go to Indonesia. Now, Indonesia, is it's a republic, right? What was it again? I'm so bad with names. It was Katanga? Katana? What was it again? It is basically Indonesia, but it's future Indonesia. He is asked to go there to gather intel because, so overpopulation is a problem. There are big eugenics laws in place, and there is a cap put on the number of children people can have.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also a lot of enforced abortions because there are there's eugenics legislation in place as well.
But and major restrictions on who can have children to begin with.
Exactly. But in this future Indonesia, there is this world-renowned, world-acclaimed geneticist, genetics researcher. Mm-hmm. And basically, the government of future Indonesia has put forward the claim that they will be able to select for entirely healthy embryos. That's the first claim. And then the second claim that they will also be able to basically do design a baby. So improve upon the genetics of human beings to make superhumans. And so the US wants to verify these claims, and they send Donald, because Donald is one of the only non-locals who's fluent in that language. I think that was it, right? That he could basically speak the local language fluently.
And also has enough genetic engineering to know when he gets there if what he's looking at is possible.
To assess the claim as, So that's kind of the central plot. But, so this is New Wave. So straightforward storytelling is not necessarily the most important concern in this book. So you have this kind of central plot, but around it are woven world building and secondary storytelling that show you the consequences of overpopulation, of eugenics legislation on different kinds of people in society and in different places in the world, though chiefly the West, and then Europe and the United States. So structurally, this book is
about a dozen different point of views overall. Some of them are not no point of view, kind of hovering above.
Just don't want.
Examining a thing. Others are from a specific perspective. Others are following. There are a couple of point of view characters who have like recurring chapters where we drop in on them 2 or 3 times over the development of a little story. Others are one-off chapters that just look at, an event or describe a document from in-world.
So basically the book it's divided, but not like cleanly. It's divided into 4 kinds of chapters, but they're kind of spread out evenly. And I never realized this before, but when you actually look at the table of contents of this physical edition, you get all the chapters of a certain kind of storytelling together. So you could actually read all of the continuity chapters in one go if you wanted. I didn't realize that. But so yes, you have context.
That's interesting because I have a digital copy, and my one basically thinks that there's only it lists, I think, just the continuity chapters as the chapters essentially, and it doesn't have, because I was trying to search through to find what is it. There's like the happening world.
Yes. So those are they're kind of like newspaper clippings of various different things, or they can be lists of. There's one of them is like a list of recipes for DIY explosives.
Yeah, I think it's inspired by the Anarchist Cookbook.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah, it's basically this world anarchist cookbook showing off some of the kind of premier technologies. One of the big technologies is just kind of not the focus of the story, but just kind of in the background is tailored bacteria that are engineered. Some of them are engineered to eat plastic waste. Some of them are engineered to produce specific chemicals. It's like an omnipresent part of this future, and one of them is used it's like it's supposed to be used for building and it eats concrete, but
Yes.
the document tells you like, oh, you could do lots of creative things with
That's
this.
exactly, yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, oh, it's like the anarchist cookbook.
Yeah, no, kind of plausibly deniability of like, oh well, do it yourself what you want with the information.
So that's the happening world. So it's like these lists of little factoids, bits of data, bits of current events, and then you have the tracking with close-ups. So that's basically following all these secondary points of view, just a scattering of points of view. You have a pregnant drug addict, you have a old married couple where the husband's cheating on his wife because he's miserable with his life because he's an old fuddy-duddy. There's a couple of there's a brother and sister whose parents were French Algerians and missed the colonial Algeria of their youth, blah blah. And then there's context, and that's a lot of the bits of context are actually extracts from these fictional philosophy books by this kind of important and recurring secondary character who is a kind of, well, he's a philosopher
with real Slavoj Žižek energy, just kind of like a wild drunken.
He's very disillusioned with people.
Like has occasional lucid moments of incredible insight, and then he goes back to like raging, and he's fun. I like Chad.
I like that character, Chad. Yeah, he's Chad, and so for a while he was homeless. But so a lot of those context chapters are kind of his philosophical musings and reflections on the current situation of society. And then you have the continuity chapters, and the continuity chapters are the actual, through line plot.
Traditional, literary
traditional plot. So that kind of sets the scene for the book and its story. So I thought we'd start, maybe actually first give, not with too much detail, a general impressions, appreciation of the book, and then we'll obviously go into detail as we go along. You can go first.
Okay, so this is my second time reading it.
Oh, that's right. I forgot to say that. Yeah.
No, but the first time I read it was 2 years ago now, I think it would have been about. And I have to say, I really enjoyed it. I definitely, okay, like when you look up Stand on Zanzibar, the prescience of some of the predictions is what people focus on.
That is,
for example, it's casually mentioned at points in the party that it depicts America, particularly in America, in the way that because he was running in the 1960s at the height of the beginning of the drug war on drugs, and he predicted America where marijuana would be not only legal but socially acceptable, and a big business with advertisements and what is it? Ask the man who married Mary Jane. I like that. I like the kind of corny big business advertisement for it. And then other states like Idaho, I think it is, one of Illinois is passing a law that in order to live there, you need to prove that the last 3 generations of your family also lived there. One couple is they're pregnant, and the husband has heterochromia and so color blindness, and it's an illegal abortion under their state's laws, and so they've bought tickets to Puerto Rico because it's still, and then they're cursing because as they were getting ready to move, having already bought tickets, Puerto Rico then bans this kind of moving to abortions, which mirrors the current debates about Midwestern states passing laws. About Texas passed a law about women leaving the state to get abortions and stuff, and this so that is your that's kind of the dominant impression the first time around, where you're like, wow, this so I guess I have a bit of a more negative, not negative, but less good impression of it the second time around, because I think it's a very strong book. I definitely think while I really like the different chapters and the different points of view, it does throw you into that concept
Yeah.
of right. Whereas, because I don't really know what this world is, and I feel like once I have the plot with Donald and Norman actually moving, and I have more of a sense of like
It
living in,
anchors you. Yeah.
it's easier to hang the different little chapters off of that main structure.
Yes.
So I definitely felt that more this
Yeah.
second. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, we can talk more about it later. It's not for the woman lovers in the audience, I would say.
No, but don't worry. We'll come back to that.
It's of its time.
In some ways, it's yeah. So yeah, I should. Oh, sorry.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll
go
let you
ahead.
go because there's a bit of history too, but
Yeah.
I'll let you go.
Okay. I should have led with that. So yes, I decided to read Stand on Zanzibar. I had heard of it a few years ago. Actually, when I started watching BookTube, there was this one reviewer who had a video about it, and I was like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting, because she was doing all the SF masterworks. I mean, it also helps because I do semi-collect them. And then I mentioned, because I think you mentioned it to me. We were talking about books. And I was like, oh, well, I've heard of this, and you'd read it and enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, well, I'll read it. So it's basically thanks to you that I read it. And then when I told you, hey, because I got gifted this copy last Christmas, so I was, I'm going to read it. And it says, oh, well, how about I reread it alongside your first read through? And I was like, yeah, that'll be fun. And then we can talk about it. And then we're like, well, why don't we do a video review about it? So that's how that happened. So I've read my fair share of dystopias. It's a genre I'm a bit more careful with it because it can get quite depressing. But I've read all the, I've read the big three, the 1984, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451, and then my personal favorite, The Handmaid's Tale, and then also Parable. So I'm probably slightly more lukewarm than you on it. I'm happy I read it. I'm definitely happy I read it. I definitely think it's very strong in some ways. It's very interesting. So I liked it for that, but then there are things that really annoyed me with it. And then there was also a bit of a emotional distance from it, and even a kind of intellectual nitpicking, especially with the biology linked things. But again, it is of its time in a lot of ways, but still, I can't really turn that off. So definitely worth reading at least once, I will say that. But obviously, we're going to get into the meat of it. So I thought we could start with quick. I don't think we'll have that much to say about it, but I always like to cover my bases. So the writing style, the structure, pacing, kind of, that's content and form. So the form of the book, if you don't, I'll just, because I really don't have that much to say. The prose was what it needs to be. I don't really have anything that stands out with regards to the prose. It is quite funny in places. Through the character work. Now, I know that the new wave structure, that would put off a lot of contemporary readers. A lot of people who don't like these kinds of more experimental approaches to writing. I don't mind it, actually. Well, there's a little caveat. Mostly I don't mind it because I'm very driven by world building. And you do get a lot of world building in a few different ways through that structure. So I kind of like that. I mean, I've also read something like Always Coming Home from Ursula K. Le Guin that's like fictional nonfiction. So I can be pretty lenient with that stuff. I didn't mind it too much. In some ways, it makes the book stronger because it really gives you a broader picture of the world and its current situation. That being said, I do think the main traditional plot takes too long to take off. Like you said, once you do actually get into the story with Norman and Donald, then all the other bits kind of hang off of it and it anchors you and pulls you through the story. I kind of wish that had been established more strongly earlier in the book. That's probably my one big issue with the structure and the pacing. The pacing was pretty even throughout, I think. So yeah, that's what I have to say with the writing. We kind of did.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have much to add on that point because prose isn't my strong suit. But yeah, I don't. There's not much of the writing that really comes out. Except I do like humor. I do agree with the humor that like humor is hard to get through on the page, right?
Yes,
and there are points that
that's very subjective too. Yeah. Actually, I will add, what is kind of fun is that in a lot of the context chapters, I think, oftentimes, so the excerpts taken from the books written by this Chad guy, so this philosopher, and oftentimes he gives basically a word and then he defines the word, but he defines it in his own way on his own terms.
Yeah.
So it's not really tied to the
Chad
prose directly, but it's very creative. The kind of playing with words and meanings of words, I like that. So to note that.
Well, okay, so I found a blog that has all of the definitions here. Coincidence, you weren't paying attention to the other half of what was going on. Leadership, a form of self-preservation exhibited by people with auto-destructive imaginations in order to ensure that when it comes to the crunch, it's someone else's bones which will go crack and not their own. Logic, the principle governing human intellection, its nature may be deduced from examining the two following propositions, both of which are held by humans to be true and often by the same people. I can't, so you mustn't, and I can, but you mustn't.
Yeah, and they're all taken from like this fictional book called The Hip Crime Vocab by this character that is Chad C. Mulligan, the philosopher character. Yeah, no, I did like that. I thought that was a clever way of playing with language in a way that served the world building.
Yeah. There's also there's the patriotism one. A great British writer once said that if he had to choose between betraying his country and betraying his friends, he'd hoped he would have the decency to betray his country. Amen, brothers and sisters, amen. Or population explosion, unique in human experience, an event which happened yesterday, but everyone swears won't happen until tomorrow.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that's a good one too. Okay, well then, so that's about it for the writing and structure. So we could move on to character work, characters. So you did say this book is of its time in some ways. Before I say anything else, well, no, I'll start with the positive. I thought the character work was, again, there's a caveat, but for the main characters at the very least, and some of the secondary characters, I think the character work was good. Because, I mean, Norman and Donald are quite well-realized individuals. They pass my credibility. Like, do these people seem like real people test? Like, that passed that test? And they were quite nuanced, complex characters with different aspirations, motivations, etc. Like Norman is very impacted by his experience of racism, or like the experience of racism of his ancestors, because that's kind of a recurring thought he has, that like one of his ancestors was his grandfather.
I like that. It is
the thing where he was a slave.
Okay,
right?
because not to play the oppressed people card or whatever, but I am Irish, right? I did grow up on the border. There's a weird anxiety that comes with, a people with a storied tradition of resistance or oppression, and you live quite a comfortable life. These two things are also quite hard to square, especially because over time resistance seeps into the culture, like so much of Irish culture, resisting and fighting back, and it's like, who at this point, right? We kind of won, and there is a kind of part of it is almost this collective trauma, right? This like insecurity, this refusing to believe that it's not going to come back someday, or that there's this unease. But I did like that aspect. I thought that was well done, that kind of insecurity in Norman.
Yeah, because Norman displays it quite a bit. Yeah. And it's ironically kind of refreshing for a book written in the 60s where you have a main character who is African American, and then he's kind of openly looks down on white people, but it's not even hateful. It's kind of just a disdain for white people at times.
Well, it kind of like, I know it's a very like loaded term and stuff these days, but like Hotep. I'd be curious, like Hotep is this kind of Pan-African aesthetic / political cultural movement that started, in America. I'm not a particular expert on it, but it does kind of remind me of that, because I mean the Brotherhood. He's a Muslim brother, He's part of the Muslim Brotherhood, right?
Yes. He's Muslim. Yeah.
Which again in the 60s was that's actually one thing I guess that the book gets wrong, that because there's so many things, so many predictions in the book where society was going one way, like anti-drugs, and he was like, actually it's going to go the other way, right? This trend isn't going to continue, it will go back to another one, and those are the ones you're really impressed by. But you don't really discount points, because like an American person in the 1960s looking at the rise of like the Muslim Brotherhood, I don't think you'd be faulted for thinking that if fast forward 40, 50 years, Islam might be a much more mainstream part of American life, a much more acceptable thing, that would have just penetrated the culture and lost its sense of being like a foreign thing and thought of as being like that there's like a homegrown version of this, but like, because that's very much not so the case.
No.
It is very much diverged from that moment, which I thought was interesting.
No, you're absolutely right. Now that you pointed out, yeah. And then so that was Norman, and then Donald is interesting because he's such a he's a nerd and kind of passive. He's very passive at first, kind of like he's afraid of going out, but he's afraid that he's not basically interacting with his fellow man enough. And then there's this very well done scene, I will say. Like the writing of that scene was very well executed, where he's like, you know what, I should go outside. I should imbibe the outside world. And so he goes for a stroll and then ends up kind of accidentally starting a riot.
Yeah.
And it goes to absolute shit. He ends up in jail. Terrible night. But that kind of informs his character, and then this kind of sort of Damocles, like at one point I'm going to be activated by the government, and so
it's not even because at the beginning of the book, it's not even really a sort of Damocles, because it's been hanging there so long. He doesn't even really think it exists anymore, right? He's not convinced that this is ever going to happen, and then it does.
And then it does. And then it does. And then there's Chad C. Mulligan, the philosopher. It's one of those characters that just has a lot of personality, and you can totally see someone like you said, he reminded you of Slavoj Žižek.
I think he's very Žižek.
He's like very, like he's kind of given up on humanity, but also doesn't really want to. Like he
can't
get better,
help himself.
He can't help himself.
Like he keeps trying to drink himself to death and failing at that. He can't help.
He's failing at oblivion.
It's kind of it's charming, right? That like he keeps it's kind of charming and tragic that this desire to understand the world keeps dragging him back into it, even though he's very jaded of it and his inability to change.
He can't fully commit to hedonistic nihilism.
Yeah,
he can't
because it's implied that he says that basically before the plot of the book, he was a university professor in top-rated, massively successful, his hip crime vocab book, massively made him a millionaire and stuff, but he was sick of the fact that he thought that no one was actually really listening to him, and he couldn't affect anything, and so he kind of just dropped out of life to become a drunken vagrant, and then it's kind of part way into the book that he essentially just decides one day he's bored with that now too, and goes back and wants to actually try and figure out stuff again, which I like. Because funny enough, because it reminds me of a line this is such a weird pull, but it just popped in my head. There's a character from Ben 10. Any Ben 10 heads out there listening? I can't remember his name, but he's like the scientist who he has a Dr. Manhattan style accident that gives him time powers, but he's trapped in the void before he learns how to use them. And he talks about how I was lost for like thousands of years and driven insane by the madness like of whatever of eternity, but then I got bored with being mad, so I decided to become sane again because I had run out of things to do while I was mad. And like I that he has that kind of energy and I really like it.
I enjoyed that character. I mean, I rarely get attached to characters or relate to characters in novels, so it's not a big deal if I don't. I will say though, because Donald, bad things happen. I did feel very sad for Donald by the end of the book, because Donald does not end well.
I do like that, like, Donald is essentially, he's the dream of an everyman who, like, wishes, like, oh, I wish my life was more exciting, and I wish I could be whisked away on some grand adventure.
And now I regret
And then
it.
later on, he's, like,
Be careful
battered and bruised in the, like, rebels' camp, thinking, like, God, I should never have,
I should have stayed a little researcher.
Stayed home. I should have never gotten involved in any of this. I like that aspect. But then I think the character work that's in the novel, I think it really shines in regards to the smaller characters and how they're created very quickly with very little.
Yes. I will say that Bruno was very good at painting these little character sketches in the what was it? Something with like close-ups? The
tracking with close-ups.
With close-ups chapters. Yeah. You do get these very well done sketches. Like, when you just take a few I draw, so that's kind of the image I came to. You take a few pencil strokes and you're still able to kind of evoke a feeling, a spirit.
The old British racist guy.
I was like, oh, that's funny. I was literally going to bring that up. Yeah, this old married couple that basically, like, the kind of old people who are just not able to keep up with the times and adapt.
Because, specifically, world. they were white Rhodesian farmers, the ones who were kind of dead enders and wanted to hang on past that, and so they're kind of perpetually aggrieved, living in England, basically wishing for that kind of paradise that they imagined themselves.
And then the husband is cheating. Well, it's his second wife, right? It's not even his. She's his second wife.
No, because he talks about like, oh, it's so real though, because he talks about how he married other women who were from England, basically. And couldn't. He tried to be happy with them, and he could, but he couldn't be miserable with. They couldn't be miserable with him because they didn't understand. They had lost. And then he talks about how like, at least me and my third wife, at least she is from there. She was also cast out. She also has this aggrievement. We can be miserable and live in that aggrievement together, which is just very real.
You know what's weird is that, again, I'm pulling this out of kind of nowhere, but it just occurred to me, one of, I'm not going to specify who this doesn't matter, but like one of my exes, actually, he had a relationship at one point with someone, and he always told me one of the things we bonded over is being the children of French people, like French nobility. And they have this weird, so there's this kind of weird, hyper-specific background context that they could share of, like, living with parents that had this idea of like a certain standard of living and a certain idea of France, which it just kind of reminded me of that. And then it's funny because in the book, so the husband then has an affair with this young university student, this 20-year-old or something, and then he has this idea he can just continue, boffing her. And then they have like this.
He can finally be happy with someone opposed to being miserable with them.
Yes. And then they have this, he calls her, but it's like a video call, isn't it? Right? It's like a video call.
It's a video call because she was visiting. She had something to do in his town for a few days,
and he was like,
they
"Hey, we can
met
meet
at the
up."
bar. And now he has contrived some excuse to go to the town where her university is in. And now he's like, "Oh well, I just happened to be there for a business meeting. Why don't I drop by your dorm or whatever?"
And then she's not actually interested, and he's trying to kind of convince. But then he notices that they're are they kind of
they're blurred. Well, it's interesting because that's another one of the things predictions is it like video calling as well, and it's cool. It's a kind of selective video calling that has like privacy blurs for people who aren't in the frame.
You can blur backgrounds with some video programs.
Yeah, no, you can now. You couldn't in 1966.
No, of course. But then he notices that they're two, because she basically tells him, "Look, I'm in a relationship now." But not only is she in a relationship with someone, she's in a throuple, and what's more, with two men, and one of the men is a black man.
Yeah.
And like that kind of just breaks that guy. He can't handle that. Like he can't process that. He's like, "What?"
No. No. But then it's weirdly wholesome because because in the end, with our second close-up chapter, basically as the main plot develops, the American company is going to basically acquire Beninia, the small African country, in order to pull off a business deal that they are doing.
And also, well, I could just add it
and in order to do this.
Yeah. No, I was just going to add that because so this U.S. company is going to like develop Beninia, and like, what's in it for them? Beninia is on the coast, has a coastline, and apparently in the waters there's like this big deposit of minerals and industrial.
I mean, they're talking about this. There was talk about this mining in the bottom of the Atlantic again. It was brought up again by the Ukraine-Russia war in terms of like European,
I didn't know.
European like strategic material independence. Yeah, it's basically, we discovered it during the Cold War as like submarines were trying to map the bottoms of the oceans, and there have been like every now and again someone's like, "Hey, we should go mine those minerals," and until now it's just been like, not worth the expense of doing.
Yeah, actually making it accessible.
Which is a problem in the book too. But basically, in order to set up this regime, they're trying to hire like people
with colonial experience,
whatever. The guy has been accepted to the program, and he goes to try and talk about it to his wife. And his wife is like, "Oh, the blacks finally realized their mistake and want us back." And the guy is like, "Well, maybe we could," because he seems to be entertaining this fantasy that maybe I can reconcile myself to this new world. Maybe I'm not too old to play along. And then he has this thought of like, "Oh God, she's going to ruin it. Who am I kidding? We are who we are. The world has moved on." And then he walks into his living room and shoots himself.
Yeah.
And then there's a great thing later on where we have this little kind of roundup, where are they now thing, and it's like James.
Because I mean,
James took his own life while in a disturbed state of mind. That's it.
Because the other sketch I really kind of stuck in my mind was it's interesting because I knew the term from the French pieds noirs, so Blackfeet. Blackfeet are French people who were in Algeria. And so you have this brother and sister. Now, they were born in France, lived all their lives in France. Their parents were Blackfeet Algerians. And so they grew up listening to their parents wax poetic about their time in Algeria. And so this brother and sister couple, and I'm using this word in more ways than one, have this weird, like, inherited nostalgia for colonial Algeria. And so the brother is Pierre, right? I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. The brother is married, but it's again one of those things, he can't really relate to his wife because he lacks this deep emotional yearning for something he didn't even experience firsthand. And the only person he can share that with is his sister. And so you have these little vignettes of them kind of talking about this, and they apply to the Beninian recruitment program to get people with colonial experience, but then they are rejected. Right? I think they're rejected. They don't actually.
Yes, they are rejected.
And they kind of but then there's this weird thing where I think the guy's wife is kind of sick of him, and she also doesn't like how close he is to his sister. And then it takes a turn where I was kind of like, I'm not really sure about that. Even though it kind of makes sense thematically, I'm not sure it entirely makes sense from like a psychology point of view. But basically the sister tells her brother, look, it's basically us against the world. You're the only person I can relate to on this very important topic. And she basically like makes a pass at him. And so it veers into incest. And I was kind of like, okay. Yeah. I mean, again, it kind of makes sense thematically, but I don't know. Yeah. I don't know about that, but that was interesting. That definitely stuck in my mind.
Yeah, no, they were there. Yeah, I like that. There's like, it's these two different presentations of this kind of colonial administrator class kind of nostalgia. You know, from the people who lived it directly, and one from people who were raised by people who were in it. Which is interesting. I also like that it's the guy who was like closer to the actual experience who comes around to being like, maybe like there isn't a place for us in this world anymore. And it's the two people with the more romantic, nostalgic vision who are still wedded to it and cannot move on and decide that like it's not us that's the problem, it's the world that's wrong, you know.
Because it's funny, they even that again is credit to the writing. It's described that the brother's apartment, the decoration, the furniture, a lot of it is this mixture of like Algerian styles and then French. Yeah. So it's interesting. Actually, I think we can. There are other vignettes that I found interesting, but maybe we actually put them in the. We'll mention them again in the world building because it kind of ties into that. I just wanted to add a thing with regards to character, because you did mention it. There is a woman problem in the book. A mild one. I want to be very clear. I have experienced so much worse.
Oh yeah,
so much worse. But there is a smidge of hashtag men writing women in this book.
Yeah. No.
Principally, that there
are only two main characters.
Yeah, and then like one is a CE. Well.
Oh well, yes, actually, there's old GT.
Okay. There is old GT. She's a female CEO. I don't really have much to say about her. Then there is this woman who is like a business mogul, but then her business is basically like the beauty industry. And
Guinevere Steele. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there is a lot is said about women trying to be more attractive, because there's this world building thing where a lot of women are basically kind of de facto prostitutes, but specifically to have access to housing, like the shiggies. That is how I understood, which I wasn't a super fan of that, but I'll get back to that. No, but there is this thing with Donald's plotline where he meets an Indian woman in, I did check, it's Yatakang, so the future Indonesia.
Yeah.
And the way she's introduced is fine, because it allows him, it's an airport scene where she's having trouble with immigration because she's not dressed appropriately for Yatakangi's customs.
Yeah.
And he steps in to try and smooth the situation. But then it's revealed this woman is basically terminally ill with cancer, but she might have access to treatment, because they have this geneticist, so they have good medicine in Yatakang, and so she was cancer.
And also she has cancer, and she was married to a doctor who was trialing a treatment for said cancer that involved using pig's blood or fluids from a pig at some point.
Yeah.
And he was like lynched by a conservative Islamic mob, basically, for using pig in it, and now she's had to come to Yakatang to get the treatment because she couldn't have, because
And so that's all fine, but then she runs into Donald again at the hotel, and she is revealed to, she's dying from cancer on the one hand, but she's also basically this like tantric sex goddess and comes onto him real strong, and they have just kind of wild sex out of the blue, and that just read very old male penned SF, and I was like, this is cringe. This adds nothing to the book. It's not the most offensive stuff I've ever read by any means, but I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah, and Bronwyn kind of like, you know, Bronwyn doesn't have a lot to do in Yucatan other than have sex with Donald, and and then also I guess she serves to show us the extent of Donald's knowledge of Yucatan's culture, because she is the fish out of water and he can explain stuff. But it's
because he also speaks the language.
And it could have been accomplished by other means.
And actually, I'll kind of slide us into the world building, and I mean, world building and theming kind of really go together. So I guess we'll discuss both together, really. But I'll just add a thing to the problem with the hashtag men writing women. So that was my big issue. But then there is this thing called shiggies in the book. I was a little bothered by a kind of lack of awareness or acknowledgement of basically that aspect of civil rights, because like Norman is an African-American character, and he does mention racial tensions and his concerns with racism, which I thought was good. But then there's basically nothing even remotely equivalent with regards to women's concerns, women's rights. I find that kind of interesting, especially since it was written in the 1968, when a lot of that stuff was going on. And apparently the writer, again, wrote an entire book in his Club of Rome quartet devoted to racism and the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Now, he's a man, so I think, again, not writing about it in and of itself is not a crime. It's not like there's nothing intrinsically wrong about it. I just found it, with regards to painting a future world, a bit disappointing, because it kind of felt like a lack. And the fact that most women are
especially a world in which so much of the world building is focused around birth and procreation and restrictions on it, and the female aspect should have been more
it feels missing. Like, it feels missing. And the fact that so many women are just kind of, again, it's understandable given the world you are given, that a lot of these women are poor and need a place to live, and one way to do that is to be a rent a girlfriend.
Yeah, because I was looking it up.
It's a bit limited, I guess.
Because thig is like an old Scottish word, like for beggar, basically.
Yeah,
and so shiggy is she thiggy, so she beggar is what we're saying.
So that's, I guess that was my disappointment with the greater world building. It's either that or the women are very concerned with being pretty. And I also saw carnelian nipples at least twice in the text, and I'm like, okay. But again, I do want to make clear I've seen a lot worse, but I did have to note it. But so with the rest of the world building, I'll just kind of go just over my in general. For me, the world building and then theming is the best part of the book. It's very interesting. It's very good in some ways. I do find it lacking in others. It's interesting. It feels like I do get a good tapestry of the world, but then it felt like there were holes in places, especially because it just goes all in on the overpopulation.
Yeah.
And then it feels like there are details, bits of data missing with regards, like, what is happening with the environment? What is happening with, clean drinking water? And I understand that this is probably by design, because Brunner then wrote The Sheep Look Up, which is itself dedicated to pollution and stuff. But then it kind of feels a bit incomplete with this one.
Yeah,
so that's my general thinking with that.
Those attendant problems. Well, I guess in terms of the world building, or like a big part of the world building is that we have called the fictional nation of Yucatan Indonesia interchangeably, right? The reason for this is that another one of the big production, like, I can't believe we got 58 minutes into talking about Sudan and Zanzibar, and we're only talking about muckers now.
Oh shit, the mucker! Yeah, that's a big part of the world building, though.
Muckers is another one of the big concepts that people will often point to Zanzibar as presaging our own age. And I mean, with what happened to Charlie Kirk recently, it's not an unrelevant prediction, right? So muckers in the book are individuals who snap on the pressure of living in modern society and run amok and murder until they are killed. The word amok is a Malay word.
Yeah, we did look it up the other day.
Yeah. So this was published what, 67?
In the magazine, and then as a novel, 68.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, 67, 68.
So to cut a long story short, after World War II and when Indonesia fought off Japan and fought off the Dutch attempt at recolonization and stuff, they formed a new republic, uneasy alliance between a large conservative faction within the country, but a democratic majority of liberals on one hand and communists on other. The Communist Party of Indonesia being the largest in Asia, even bigger than the one in China at the same time. And it's like we don't think about it much today. Very big in people's imaginations in the 1960s, in the Cold War, when we talk so much about Vietnam, domino theory in regards to Vietnam. Indonesia is the domino that people were afraid Vietnam would tip over. Like that, when we say domino theory, means that's it. So in 65 to 66, the generals in the country allied with the conservative faction accused the president and the Communist Party of plotting a coup d'etat against the rest of the country to institute a communist state, and so seized power and instituted a purge of Communist Party people. This blew out to a nationwide genocide. The estimated figures are somewhere around 500,000 to 1 million people killed. Other estimates can go as high as 2 to 3 million, all communist left-wing partisans and stuff. This was introduced to the West in an article published in the New York Times, Sulzberger, 1966, When Nations Run Amok. And this is the big popularization of the word amok in like Western discourse. And it basically, the article says that the mass violence in Indonesia is because, like, you can't say that you can't call it a genocide or call it pogroms because, or intentionality, because it's Cold War. We want the non-communist state to be on our ally, talking to the American side. And so that, combined with like European racism, basically leads to this explanation of like, well, they just kind of ran amok, right? That this is a kind of violent outburst. If you want to learn more about this, couldn't recommend more the Jakarta method. Hold on.
I'll also put it in the description.
There's the Jakarta method by Vincent Bevins. And there is The Killing Season, a history of the Indonesian massacres, 1965-1966, by Geoffrey B. Robinson. They talk more about the whole problem of the word amok being basically the depictions of amok as being this Malay tradition. Like most of the descriptions are from Europeans. There's only a very select few descriptions. It definitely was a thing. There's two kinds of amok, like a solitary and a collective, and the collective is basically kind of a bloodthirsty charge into an enemy, which is a kind of like
a berserker charge.
In French, there are these concepts of this kind of like, spirit of, into a charge. And then there's another.
Sorry. You said Elan. I was like, what? A French what? I was like, Elan. Sorry. I was like, what are you saying?
Elan, Yeah. I mean, there's ban in Irish as well. Is another. I think it is, or the van. Of the fight. Means the middle, the part of the most action, right? Yeah, and so given the timing and the fact that the Yakatang, amok is such a central concept to the book, the word amok, and that
The muckers.
the muckers and the fact they took the word amok to use for that, and the fact that it's a Southeast Asian nation that is a communist country.
Yes.
I think that revolution had a big, which is interesting because outside of that, that revolution has like zero or impact on, the canon of Western culture. Like you don't really talk about that or like Indonesian in general. But yeah, I just wanted to add that kind of historical context to.
No, and actually, I want to bounce off of that. I will say that's one thing I did appreciate about the book is it does seem like Brunner was, I don't know what his background or training was, that doesn't necessarily matter. But it seemed like he knew quite a bit about geopolitics because it all felt believable and informed. And I like that it's one of those books. It's not just in the UK or in the US. Like it goes into Asia, Africa, which a lot of Western SFF sometimes kind of forgets exists. Like, okay, there's a little anecdote because it really made me laugh out loud. Mm-hmm. Like he even mentions something that I'm sure the vast majority of people outside of Belgium, or at least mainland Europe, have absolutely no idea is a thing. He mentions Belgium, the country I'm from, basically splitting in two. Yeah. And this is extremely funny. So just tiny bit of local geopolitics. Belgium is made up of two big linguistic communities, Dutch-speaking and French-speaking. That there was a historical conflict, cultural linguistic conflict between these two communities. Though most Dutch people don't have issues with French speakers. But at least at the political level, it's a whole thing. There is a Flemish nationalist party in Flanders, et cetera, et cetera. And so every once in a while, you get in the press this idea, will Belgium ever split into two entities, et cetera. And so it was very funny to me that this Englishman wrote a novel in 1968 in which he was like, in 2010, there will no longer be a Belgium, there will be Flanders and Wallonia. I just bust out. I was impressed that he knew about this and was just like, that's one of my predictions for my fictional universe. That was very funny.
I think it's also in that section he talks about Israel going in a more fascist direction.
Yes. I was like, all right, on another.
That one feels a bit too precious.
Ouch. It's a bit sad he didn't drop in a unified Ireland though.
Yeah, no.
He wasn't perfect.
Well, that's the Englishman, but perpetually, even the most worldly Englishman has a tin ear when it comes to cries for liberation coming from inside the UK. But there's definitely, it's also with the way it treats Beninia, it's very in dialogue with, I guess, development ideology, which has come into more critique in the last 2 or 3 decades.
Well, there's even, do you remember that there's a place in the book where there's a table that compares developed countries, developing countries, underdeveloped countries,
Oh yes.
A table that compares
No, I mean, this is because that's where all of this language comes from. Because I mean, the third world is a derogatory term now, but it was a self-identified term at the time for a kind of a non-aligned group of nations who weren't going to side with the US or the Soviet Union, even though that didn't last. And now the third world as a term, but people used to identify themselves as third worlders as a political stance. Rather than it being a geographical or sociological description. But because GT does, what the company does. If
So
if if
remind me,
Machiavelli,
yeah.
if Machiavelli, if the prince is kind of this like, what if there was a perfect enlightened prince who could implement all of the things we've learned about how to make good governance in this enlightened age, and do all the right things, right? Or Thomas More's Utopia. I think there's a bit of that when you get into like Shamalizer's plan for how Benigna is going to go from, a underdeveloped country to a modern developed country, you see that it's like, oh, what if, like that? There is a element to that in the book. Like, what if you had an enlightened, modernizer, developer in charge that could cut through the politics of it all to give us that. There's an element of that.
Well, yeah, actually, so that it's interesting. So, because you're right, a lot of people make a lot out of the fact that, oh, Stand on Zanzibar was so prescient. Now, I don't know if it's because I read a lot of dystopian literature, a lot of sci-fi. I personally, although I changed my mind a little bit hearing you talk about the book and rereading it, I was like, okay, you have a good point there. I don't think it's that prescient overall.
No, it's
It doesn't have to be. Also, I'm not like, I don't
no.
think it necessarily matters all that much either,
No.
but whatever, that's a separate discussion. That being said, the whole kind of, we're gonna delegate our decision making to Big Daddy AI computer.
Oh yeah.
And so that's one point. Also, I think reading this book, also because of the tone, in some respects, it almost kind of reads as proto-cyberpunk because of the importance given to a corporation compared to like the state, and then a corporation which owns a super advanced AI computer.
Because in a way, this is the birth of a corpo state, right? They acquire a Benigna, essentially.
Yeah.
As part of the story, right? And you govern it for the next. And the idea is that, there's this very like rosy kind of pitch on it, which is the same thing they told to the same thing the British and the French told the Egyptians when they gave them the money or the debt to build the Suez Canal, that like, don't worry, guys, like the profits you make off of this thing, they'll allow you to pay back the debt and then some. And that, like in this, they seem to actually mean it, this time around. Other than like an implicit debt trap designed to fuck people over, like in the Suez case.
So yeah. Because it was interesting. I didn't expect that, I guess. And I mean, a lot of it's not that I even read that much cyber. I have played Cyberpunk 2077, and to me, that is a work of cyberpunk fiction. It's just a video game. There is kind of an intrinsic dystopian vibe to cyberpunk fiction, so I guess it makes sense. But yeah, no, it's funny. It's funny that I thought that. I was like, it feels almost proto-cyberpunk with this kind of.
I also
corpos.
I did find it fascinating, especially more so the second run through of like the weird tension that exists in this book between there's point of view characters that are intentionally racist in a way, in like in the Blackfeet in this kind of patronizing way, in the British guy and his wife in a more kind of explicit way. And then you've also got the way the entire book is infused with the general kind of not racism per se, but the kind of racialized worldview of a British guy who was fucking an adult in the 1960s. And especially in the kind of colonial aspect, in the relations between these countries. And I think that kind of contrast is interesting, like developed over.
Yeah.
Then also, I guess, like as to what you were saying about how prescient it is. Because if you look up, you'll find like a review online that points this out on r/books, I think.
Yeah, it might be. It's either going to be that or r/printers.
Texas mass shooter event happened, I think, 65 or whatever, just before this. And for anyone who doesn't know, the University of Texas has this large, I think it's UT, yeah, University of Texas has this large clock tower on the premises.
Oh, and right.
former U.S. Marine sniper, I think he was.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Took a
Yeah.
rifle and went up to the top of the tower and then began to shoot down at people and kill. And there was a big standoff or whatever. And it's kind of one of these big. It's a very iconic mass shooting in American history. The Simpsons, like there's an episode where Ned Flanders, Homer's religious pushover doormat neighbor. He's trying to control his anger, and he's worried about like basically dreams in which he's like, you know, being angry or whatever. And his dream is him going up to the top of the UT clock tower and putting together
Oh
and
God.
then looking through the scope at Homer, you know. And that happened, you know. So like, when it comes to the muckers specifically, right, the idea that he predicted the rise of the American mass shooting, because it's become a much more political thing to talk about as a unique problem in the last, like, you know, 10-20 years, that kind of discourse. But as the person in that review pointed out, like, that problem is a very old problem in America, and that kind of high profile public mass shooting was already beginning to become a thing while Brunner was writing. He, like, I mean, credit to him still for extrapolating out that it would become a larger problem, you know, with relation. But then again, he still places it in this way of like overpopulation being the problem.
Well,
right?
So that's what I find interesting.
I think that's a problem with the original colonial depictions of amok, that they tend to be depicted in only urban settings, and there's this tension to the reports that basically, like, you know, unlike civilized city-dwelling Europeans, these like savages from the jungle don't really know how to live together in a city, and they eventually go wild and kill each other, kind of thing. You know, and Brunner attaches these two things together, that the sense that, like, you know, basically everyone's supposed to have a certain amount of wild space to them that's impossible under overpopulation, and so people go mad and they kill each other, you know, or like.
So it's funny because, like, in terms of themes, like overpopulation is definitely a big theme of the book, but it's ironically, it's an aspect of the world building that I kind of had an issue with, because I feel like I didn't feel it enough in places.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because a lot of the chapters either focus on like people being in a boardroom meeting or being in an apartment, and I feel like ironically you needed more scenes maybe being. There is the riot scene, okay, that's one thing.
Yeah, but no, you do feel it. You feel it when he's on the streets of New York, right?
Yeah,
you don't feel
otherwise, I was like, what's it like being in a supermarket? Like, how is it affecting the supply chain? How does it feel being in school? Like, are there 50 children? It's ironic that you kind of it's a telling, not showing problem. Ironically, a little bit like overpopulation is terrible. There's so many people. It's going to be the end of the world. I'm exaggerating.
Yeah.
No. But in places you don't really feel like there's a distance. I didn't really feel it. But then conversely,
I mean, people like forget science fiction. I mean, people did, like, there was a feeling that it would be the end of the world in the 1960s. And I mean, we're only now really, you know, beginning to lose that fear and replace it with like the underpopulation.
It's strange because, and I'm going to bring up our queen in sci-fi and fantasy, Ursula K. Le Guin, may she rest in peace. One of my favorite short stories by Le Guin actually tackles the idea of overpopulation, but indirectly, and then talks about solitude, like a lot of other things, because, you know, she does all that anthropological world building. And so it's not even a focus, but she basically has the story, and the setup is there was on this planet an actual overpopulation problem. It was so bad that basically, like, most humans they nuked themselves off the map, and then generations later you have this society where isolation and solitude is like a primary cultural value, and so people don't gather in big numbers. And so ironically, I felt the consequences of a planet having that problem and how it impacted the future of that world. And I felt that a lot more. I mean, it's also because of her writing. then I felt it here, weirdly enough. Now, that being said,
there's a lot of personal. You're in people's houses and they're like living rooms alone a lot. You are
and you don't really feel it. It's like,
in offices. It's not even like I didn't even realize how few times you are in kind of a larger group setting.
You feel it more when Donald's in Indonesia. You feel it more because like there's
there's a very well done chapter in particular that is it's hard to even describe. It's like you're floating around a party,
hearing people's thoughts,
like hearing different
snippets of
conversation, different circles of conversation as like a row. Like there's that. And then I think the second time, this time reading around more, there's another chapter as well that is like that uses this format of just kind of individual sentences broken up. And sometimes a sentence is a standalone thought, sometimes like 2 or 3 sentences together or a chunk. Maybe it's a bit of dialogue, maybe it's an expanded thought, maybe it's an ad. That I felt prescient to me in the weird, overwhelming feeling of information it gave me that felt like scrolling through an information feed.
Yes.
This like constant, like to this, to that, this thing, that, like unrelated concepts, gossip, news, articles, ads, news, article, like I thought that effect was very good, especially for all the things he's prescient about, or whatever. I guess you could have predicted that like there would be more technology in our lives and that it would be connected to entertainment, but like that kind of view of information technology in the future I thought was very good. And then I guess given that Josh Brunner is the person who, I only found this out when we were researching to do this video, but from his other work, coined the term computer virus.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Computer worm.
Oh yeah.
To describe a self-replicating computer program, and about which I mean
that's cool. Yeah,
that's incredible, right? Like those two terms have entered like the English language, just parlance completely. I could walk to a 9-year-old granny and be like, "You have a computer virus." I also think of like the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where Frank does the ad. It's like, "You have a virus" at the end of it. This is virus. You guys, very good, very good.
There was also which I don't know why I didn't latch onto that, but you said like that one point.
That comes from computer virus, like.
Oh right, yeah.
That's Brunner today. Like we talk about those social forms with this biological language, and I mean that's in part Brunner.
You also said at one point like a contraceptive implant is mentioned.
Yes, no, a contraceptive plant is a hormonal
implant,
because at the time it was written, doesn't bear thinking about it, but there were older mechanical forms of contraceptive women could have, but I think it's not until the late 80s, I think, that the first hormonal based forms of IUDs come available. It's after
maybe IUDs. I don't
basically know. It was a speculative technology when the book was published.
Yeah, no, that was cool. The population thing, which is a bit funny given it's such a big idea. For me, I guess it's at times the consequences of overpopulation are very well executed, especially when it comes to like culture and social mores. But then they're kind of unrooted from the base. Like, show me the actual overpopulation. You did a very good job showing the consequences, less so the actual.
But then it's interesting because a lot of our main cast, they are of a social class insulated from the effects of this stuff, and they aren't blind to that, and they do talk about that, but like, at a certain point you wrote the book and you could have shown, why didn't you add point of view characters?
At one point there is one of the why can't I forget? Why can't I remember? It's like something with close-ups. Like, I can't remember the full thing, but the close-ups chapter, there is a family where you have this guy, he's working at a he's a marijuana factory.
Yeah,
he's like a biologist, basically working on creating new strains of cannabis, I think.
Yes.
And so that's what I mean. The consequences of overpopulation are well described. For instance, like there's this whole thing where there's been a split in the Catholic Church, where the old school Catholic Church, the base Catholic Church has moved with the times and is not so gung-ho about procreation at all costs. What?
Can you hear that on the recording? It's just Bella. His dad dropped her off, and now she's at the door going.
Why did you have to open the door for her?
Yeah. No, hold on. I'll be back.
Yeah, no worries. Oh, puppy.
And then you can go back to the beginning of that thought.
Yeah. So I'll describe the thing. So there's the base Catholic Church, which is more tolerant of the idea that you can have non-procreative sex because there are too many people, so you don't need to make babies as much. But then there's been a split where there's the right Catholics, and they're sticking to their guns of like, go forth and like, what is it?
Yes, and go forth and prosper. No. Be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah, be fruitful and multiply, and they're like, you need to have many babies because God wants that. And so there's this split in the Catholic Church, and then there's this guy, so he's working for a marijuana plant, and he is
a real
right
split,
Catholic.
by the way. It is based on a real thing. I think they're called Anabaptists.
Oh.
But yes, because Vatican II happened in the 60s as well. For those who don't know, Vatican II was it was like the last big Catholic papal conclave thing where they met to hash out church doctrine, and they changed a bunch of stuff. The big ones are mass could now be given in the
local language, vernacular,
and
that's the big one.
That's the big one. The second big one that they don't talk about is the Jewish one, where beforehand every Jew inherited like an original sin that was something akin to original sin, connected to their pardoning of the criminal and not Jesus during the Passion of Christ. They changed it to be that not every individual Jew, like the Jews,
is bad.
People had their own actions, and then you get Latin American Revolution theology, which is basically like a Latin American critique of the church being too cozy with authority over its history, and that align itself more with the radical, dispossessed of the world. But basically there were a bunch of people who thought this a betrayal of the real conservative values of the church, and they split off because they mentioned that the right pope was in Spain, and I think they are in Spain.
Oh, right. And I mean, in the past, you also had multiple popes, right? But like, stop. In the past, there have been periods where there was more than one pope.
The Avignon papacy and stuff. There were 3 of them for a brief period. I'm pretty sure.
But so it's interesting because like you see this man, and this man has had in secret, like off the books, he's had 5 kids, and that is illegal, basically, right? And then he's being
two-child policy.
Yeah, and he's being blackmailed by gang, whatever, and because they want him to smuggle out a super potent strain of cannabis that they can then deal out, whatever. And it's interesting because you see him like in his little apartment, and there's a lot of tension between him and his wife, and he's like, we should move because because with his current wife, he has 3 kids because one of the pregnancies was twins. So that was an accident. But everyone in their apartment block judges the crap out of them. And then you have this, and that's where the book is really strong with those little world-building details where there is a little niche in the wall where there's a little plastic figure of the Virgin Mary, and there's like a contraceptive pill glued onto it or something.
Yeah, like crammed in its mouth.
Crammed in its mouth, and so it's interesting
And
how
it
you see
says
how
below it, it says like it's like in graffiti below. I think if it's good enough for Mary,
yeah,
it's good enough for her. It's good enough for you.
and so it's interesting to see how people, like the social mores and the conventions people have around family and having children, shift to adapt to these new policies, although there's also a lot of resistance. So again, those consequences of overpopulation, then you mentioned the muckers, although that kind of veers into a side theme of, I don't know if it's even a theme, but there is a discussion about nature versus nurture a little bit in this book. Not always in a good way, but because Chad Mulligan, some of his chapters discuss the actual nature of humans. And then there's this whole, I actually really like that chapter. There's a chapter that goes into a discussion of the importance of private space for psychological well-being that I thought was interesting. So the kind of psychological pressures that would lead people to act increasingly violently because they're surrounded by people and by judgment and by pressures to, well, you know, I mean, we don't necessarily act the same way when there's people around us as we do when we're on our own. So that also tracks. And then the drug use, like a lot of, but that's the thing though, there's this disconnect between these awful consequences, like people, there's all these super fancy drugs that people are taking. Mm-hmm. You have this chapter where there's this pregnant woman she takes something and then she's convincing herself, or like she thinks she's been told by a doctor that it's fine for the baby, right? Remember that?
Yeah. There's one particular one that is bad.
Skullbustium?
Yeah.
Bust your skull. And then she ends.
Yeah. Yeah, she's basically like, she is in a relationship with a guy and they're both basically users, and they basically have this delusional idea that if they basically
take this drug but not that one,
the pregnancy, that the child will be born with this like beautiful trippy view of the world and not have to see. They're like, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if he didn't have to see this world ever in its grays and stuff. And then she ends up like, and then there's the kind of like there's like eugenics police basically who are knocking on their door to ascertain that she's not doing drugs and that she isn't doing anything to interrupt the pregnancy, and then she tries to hide in a closet, which is actually a window, and she jumps out of it.
And yeah, which was like, oh.
Oh,
that is the. Oh yeah.
Very short one. Just it's like it's written. It's like 2 pages long. It's written like a bureaucrat's form from like a county council, and it's just a description.
Oh yeah.
This old woman and her house being taken away from her and her assets being sold, and then her dying of heartbreak in a nursing home. I'm like, oh my god. It's like within 2 pages I'm like on the verge of tears. It was that was great.
That ironically I would say is quite prescient.
Like that point, the woman with the baby and the British guy, like, of course, the British guy. But yeah, you can tell Brunner is a British person in those moments, especially with reference to like the council.
Oh right, yeah. But the
British life.
The old woman, I would say, is ironically quite prescient because it kind of foreshadows the way we're like parking our old folks into homes and forgetting about them.
Yeah.
But you mentioned eugenics. That's another big. Well, eugenics, and then this idea of nature versus nurture, and like the true, like actual, what is human nature with regards to like peace and violence? All of that kind of goes together, and I think is in tandem with the overpopulation theme, because there a lot of countries have eugenics legislation, because not only do we need to limit birth, we want to make sure that the babies we do have are healthy and have good genes. And it's so extreme though, because like people can be banned from having children if they have fucking color blindness. I don't know. I thought that was kind of like wild.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it seems to be that it's like they've basically gotten all of the big ones at this point, I think, is the implication, right? Or
Yeah,
the
so he's
more
not the
obvious,
target.
there's
It
not
is
enough.
further reasons to limit birth, I guess.
Yes.
Because I guess it is a way to justify it as well beyond a simple, there's too many of us. Like, there's too many
Yeah,
of
no.
us and we're not healthy enough, so.
But like it's a problem with like genetic fitness, right? That like eventually, like once you start drawing a circle, there's always going to be an impulse to draw it tighter, right, and include less people, and be like, once we've gotten rid of like the heterochromia, why not the people without 20/20 vision, or at what point along the line does like skin color or these things start to become defects, or when view once you take this reductionist kind of frame.
And I think ultimately it kind of works well with the idea of overpopulation as a theme, because I guess it is exploring what happens to human beings on a societal level, on a psychological level, when you have the pressure of so many other people around you. Like on the societal level, obviously you have the muckers, you have the eugenics legislation, and then you have all these personal vignettes, like people taking drugs to zone out. So it all feels rather, but again, it feels apocalyptic, but it also feels like there's a layer of credibility missing, which gave me a kind of a weird feeling, which also
Well,
kind of, yeah.
I don't know. I like the kind of quiet dystopia, because I mean,
Yeah,
we're not quiet, but as in,
it is kind
you
of.
know, because I thought there was an interesting thing in like the AI boom at the minute, right? And this question about whether or not chat GPT is conscious or whatever, I think we're all pretty clear that
There
it's
is that
not at
question
this
in the book.
point. It's like from the point of view of like, a year ago, there was all that talk. And
Yeah.
it also, there's talk in the book, throughout the book, there's speculation about Shamalizer or Shamalizer, or how did you say it?
Shalmaneser.
Shamalizer. Like there's a speculation about whether or not, when will he become,
Yes, conscious, self-aware,
when will
whatever you
it
want to
be
call it.
conscious? And like Chad Mulligan, proffers the idea that like maybe it already is. Like maybe
Yes,
I've not noticed that
and it's just hiding it from us.
or not even hiding it, but it's just not entirely evident in the way that you interact with it. Like, would you notice that the homeless person you pass on the street is an intelligent, thoughtful human being? No, because you don't give them an interaction. And like, and if you see a computer as a computer and you just feed it information and ask it questions to check your math, which is what they're doing with Shamalizer initially, like, of course you're not going to get an intelligent you're not going to prove its intelligence, because you're not really giving it, you're not even, you have to give it the benefit of the doubt essentially first, that there is something more there. Even the idea of just like running it, running the computer without, and I think it's Norman basically, when they're like, there's a point in the novel where they've been using Shamalizer to calculate how this Panini project is going to go.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's been going well, and then suddenly the computer grinds to a halt and is like, "No, I don't believe this place exists
And everyone freaks
anymore.
out.
I've suddenly decided that Panini cannot exist." And it stops working, and they're all trying to figure out how to get it to take commands again. And it's during this period that Norman is like, have you ever run it without a purpose before? Have you ever just turned it on and let it sit there? And the scientist is basically like, no, we haven't, because there's far too much demands on its time to ever, and then he talks about like scheduling in a period of inactivity for like 2 or 3 years down the line, I think it is, before they could like line up a time where there'd be nothing.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
company,
It rents
it's
out
very funny.
time on the
It's an
computer.
idea of a globalized tech future from a very 1960s perspective.
Yes.
And so people are renting time on
On the
Shamalizer
yes.
to do their calculations
Then
for them.
you're also told that you're also told that there's like another supercomputer that
Yeah,
Europeans
there's
rent
like
out
some
as well.
users. China has one, Europe
Yeah.
has one.
And they rent it out to
Um,
other less powerful countries.
yes. But that's a very
Yes.
1960s idea of computers, right? That you're
Yes.
renting time on a mainframe, or like,
Yes.
or that like there would like that computers would still be these fundamentally scarce objects that would
Yeah.
be like big institutionally guarded things you need to book time on, like university computers in the
Yeah.
1960s, right? You book time in the computer lab on the computer. Not that like there would be a computers would be so cheap we'd put them in disposable fucking items to be thrown away, like an actual computer in a vape, basically, to do a little digital screen displaying up and down just to be chucked in the bin. you know it's charming. It has a kind of like Cowboy Bebop Fallout kind of vibe to it, where like these big clunky computers that are like the tech is there and it's big and important, but the bigness stops it, like allows like a relatively non-tech life to exist beside it.
Yes. Yeah, no. That's why it's not full on cyberpunk at all.
Yes, no,
It's not like that at
because
all, but yeah.
like you can see the beginnings of cyberpunk,
You
but
can
like
see,
the
yeah, you can
key
see it coming down
insight,
the road. Yeah.
the key inside of cyberpunk, that computers would infiltrate every part of not only
Yeah.
social life but also your body. It's that's not there
No,
just
that's
yet.
not there at all. No. No.
Uh, I do like the biology stuff, though. There's a focus on the biological technology. Apart from the human, there's the human genetics angle, but the tailored bacterias
No, the
and
bacteria, that's fun. Yeah, no, I like that. But actually, yeah. So that's it's interesting. Again, it's a kind of mixed experience because again, the world building and the theming works very well in some ways. Although again, the central motif of overpopulation, it kind of feels old now because it just has not panned out that way. Although I think that the thinking around it is still valuable, and I've encountered that thinking in other works of older SF too. To be fair, like I do like this idea of what happens when there are too many people. Like it makes sense that people would go nuts in a way. Like if you put too many chickens in a cage.
yeah,
Like battery farming is bad.
yeah,
We would not like to be in a battery farming environment, right? Although it's not even like that in the book. But so I like the kind of warning against the psychological and societal consequences if something like that happened. Well, I still think that like you could say it's still semi-relevant in areas where there's high population density and poverty. Although again, is it only because of the overpopulation? Probably not, but it's still probably not good for us either. Because again, there is that chapter that talks about the importance of private personal space, which I think was interesting. But there is the ending of the book, and what you could read it as saying about human nature and human nature in relation to peace and violence, because there is a chapter which I didn't personally like, but I don't have to agree with something to enjoy it, but it was not to my taste, and I was like, it does feel a bit old. There's a chapter also that is, I think, one of the Chad C. Mulligan chapters that goes into the whole thing about humans being intrinsically territorial. The whole like we're more like chimps than bonobos, that kind of discussion. It's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And so there is the whole, eugenics has been a big part of the story. And then there's this plot line with Donna. We're going to go get the Yatakangi's Indonesian geneticist. Because it turns out, in the end, that Beninia has been made out to be this strangely peaceful place in Africa. Again, the surrounding countries have tried to invade it, or there have been European colonial powers that have tried to colonize it, and every time they go in, somehow they lose the will to fight, to conquer, to invade, and everyone just kind of gets along. And then that was actually a bit of world building I really like, again, around the religion and the beliefs. So the Xinca people, and you mentioned this a little bit, have this folk hero who, and there are lots of stories about this kind of culture, folk hero, and he has a shield with a hole in it, and he always resolves his conflicts peacefully. Like, he never resorts to violence. So it's very ingrained in their culture. There's even a bit of linguistic discussion around the Xinca language, that they don't really have a word for anger, which was interesting.
Yeah. They have the word for anger implies insanity.
Yes.
Like, you can't describe someone as being angry without also describing them as being completely unmoored, right?
Yes.
Like there's no reasonable way to be angry. You know, the word is intrinsically, this person has lost their plot. Why would you be angry? It's an unrational.
Which is very interesting, because that kind of reminded me of another book I read this year, which I think you should read at some point, which I really, really enjoyed. It's A Door into Ocean by Joan Slonczewski. I'm still not entirely sure that's how you pronounce her name, which has this ultra pacifistic culture, and they see violence as insanity as well. Anyway, it kind of reminded me of that. But so it turns out, and in fact, it's so bizarre that they're like so unlike every other culture on Earth. This is what's making the computer bug out. It's like, given everything I know about humans, these people, they don't exist. It's not possible that
they don't work with the rest of the world.
Right. And then you eventually learn, because Norman goes there, he brings in his buddy Chad C. Mulligan, and Chad says, I want access to biologists, doctors, physicians, psychologists, sociologists, and I want to pick their brains. And they come up with the idea that basically the Xinca, they have a peace gene. I'm simplifying. They have a peace gene that makes them secrete pacifying pheromones. That makes everyone
a pheromone that turns off people's aggressive response. Yeah.
And I kind of hated that. I did hate that.
It's a weird. It is a bit of a kind of an abrupt ending as well. Yeah. I liked where it was going because okay, so I like where it was going in that, like, the other part of the plot is basically, because that's basically how that the other side of the plot, Donald after being sent to Indonesia,
we should probably also add that he went through this horrible kind of brainwashing training the army put him through, called eptification, and it basically, it's mind control techniques kind of, and subliminal messaging.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, if you have read Hank Green's book, the second one is, what is it? A Beautifully Remarkable Thing and an Absolutely Foolish Endeavor.
I think
one of them is the second. Hold on, I need to go check my map.
But yeah, so Donald goes through this process called
Foolish Endeavor. That has something like a less traumatic version of aptification, where you can learn skills and knowledge by having someone else's experiences kind of overlaid on you.
Yeah.
And so that's what it's kind of like, I feel like it's inspired by kind of like, what do you call it?
CIA experiments.
Wormwood? Yeah. Not wormwood, something wood.
MK Ultra? No, that was LSD.
Yeah, no, it was. It's related
kind
to
of shit. Yeah.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah,
LSD. Suggestibility and
it is Wormwood. Oh, yes, no, Wormwood was a series about one of the people who was targeted by the MK Ultra thing. That's it.
Yeah, so that kind of shit. And Donald is taught 10,000 different ways to kill people. Yeah. And he eventually does kill someone. He kills a mucker. Well, actually, he was helping out, but it just breaks him. Like, the entire experience, it breaks his understanding of his own self. He doesn't know who he is anymore. It's like his former self died. Psychologically, he's fucking broken. So that's kind of sad.
No, but like, yeah, so like he's trying to get an interview with the lead scientist to figure out if this is real.
Yes.
A mucker attacks, and he saves the scientist's life, which
Yes.
gets him his interview.
Yes.
And the scientist reveals that basically the government is lying about their claims. Donald thinks that they're lying about cleaning up the genomes of people. So sorry, they're telling the truth about about
optimizing
cleaning the genomes of people,
yeah.
which is presented as a realistic thing, but you would need a lot of trained doctors and nurses to do it. Yeah. And they're lying about the ability to enhance human beings genetically, which is presented as the like surely science fiction thing. And what the lead scientist confesses in this moment to Donald, it is that it's the reverse. That the country has nowhere near enough doctors or nurses to get anywhere close to cleaning up the nation's genome for the first claim, but that he has been experimenting on chimpanzees.
Orangutans.
It's orangutans. And that he was able to mentally enhance them to the point where they could learn English, speak a few words, understand advanced concepts. And Donald is like,
most of them ended up committing suicide.
Yes. Dan's like, that's incredible. And he's like, no, because there's only one of them alive. Yeah. And basically he decides he wants to flee the country in order to get out. It's funny because he's presented as the scientist and he's like, I need to flee the country because I don't want my legacy to be destroyed by the government. And then Donald is going to smuggle him out to the camp of the rebel leader that the Americans are sponsoring in the region. And immediately the scientist is like, what do you mean the rebel? I didn't ask to be involved in civil war, basically. Yeah. And then Donald was like, what did you think you were asking when you were asking to betray the government, right? This very I like him as this representation of like not an evil scientist, but a very naive.
He's naive, yes.
Very interesting how he's being used. But basically, while they're waiting at their extraction point, the scientist gets cold feet and tries to betray the operation. And Donald steps in and murders him, kind of by instinct that's been bred into him.
Yes.
And then the kind of Chad C. Mulligan's final moment in the book is to lament that basically had the scientist lived, they could have genetically engineered the peace gene into everybody, and it could have been just a new human race.
Yeah.
But now that we just know about its existence and we can't engineer into people, that will need to. He has a line about like, this should be the right of every person. It shouldn't be dropped from a UN helicopter or sold in an aerosol can. And I guess there's that kind of like, I guess there's kind of something going on here about like lamenting the fact that the thing, just this kind of Marxian alienation of people, like the things we used to get from other people, we now get from the government's aid or through.
You definitely do get a sense of like a disintegration of social bonds as well, which that is prescient in itself.
That is, that this technology would have that kind of deleterious effect on
like people would rather escape into like drugs, for instance, than relate. So that's
one of the characters is just a guy who is tripping out on drugs, watching his television, and dies there just watching the TV, and then keeps saying to him, keeps repeating himself over and over again. Yeah, Christ, what an imagination I've got. Which is also the ending line of the book.
Which I did love. So I hated the kind of big thematic ending with the it kind of just goes full ham on genetic determinism, which I'm not a fan of. But the last little chapter with you have the fucking AI computer going, God, what an imagination I got. I was like, okay. Yeah. That was funny. That was well done. I got a smile.
I love that. I did love that little bit, and then it's left, and left like there's no placing that. I love it. all the different ways you can take that
statement.
No,
that was very clever. I was like, okay, I like that.
Believing it's just imagining all of this input,
God, what imagination I've got.
Yeah, or is it just thinking away to itself? Or there's I like that line. I like that.
I kind of like, I guess, the kind of poetry of it in a weird way, of kind of like this recurring little leitmotif and then bing.
Yeah, no, and it's like, I like the way that, this whole plot of humanity, this very human-centered plot around us and breeding and our continuum and stuff is basically quietly in the background as we quietly render up ourselves. And then because there's a bunch of stuff with Chamanizer, I guess, because that's what and then I guess in the same, to my earlier point I was trying to make about a quiet dystopia, and the fact that Chamanizer, what if Chamanizer is already awake, already conscious? It's like the dystopia's already happened. There isn't a big thing.
It's kind of the thing. I think I wrote this down. It's kind of like, the world ends with a whimper, not a bang.
Yeah,
it's kind of that idea a bit. I think I basically kind of covered everything I wanted to with themes and well, the one thing I wanted to say, it's funny, I just wanted to say, as we talked about the book, it's weird. I don't know that it's a theme as such, but it's actually kind of interesting to see how much colonialism is a motif in this book as well.
Well, I mean, he's a British guy in the 1960s. Right? Empire was breaking up. Britain was having to redefine what it meant to be a British person. Sans the last century of British culture before that was entirely one and a half centuries. It's the empire was Britain, Britain was the empire. Everyone,
but it's funny how much
realignment periods,
It's just so present in the book, but it's only as we've been talking about it I was like, oh yeah, colonialism.
Oh wow.
But I don't know if you wanted to add something with the themes or the world building.
Yeah, I guess of all the big ticket things that are the oppression, the muckers, the drugs, the social mores and stuff, the information space is what it feels. There's something about the vibe of Stands on Zanzibar that because it's got the why can't I think of it now? It's got the Brave New World kind of dystopian angle of we will be destroyed by a kind of addiction to carnal, libidinal pleasures, right?
And an apathy that goes with it. Yeah.
That will be, and that will kind of erode social norms and our care for each other.
I agree. This is a lot more along the lines of Brave New World than something like 1984. It's much more.
But Brave New World feels to me almost like Agent Smith has that line in The Matrix about the first Matrix was a utopia, but people weren't happy with that because they were it was a dream that they kept waking up from. This is a real world.
Believe in it, yeah.
There's something placid about the world of Brave New World in a way. I can't really believe that people would be okay with a world that is that libidinal pleasure-seeking people would be in a world that is so placid and unturmoiled that there wouldn't be who would be seeking libidinal pleasure. In this book, there's a running subplot of people in the book who seek libidinal pleasure in a kind of stochastic terrorism. They sabotage.
Oh yeah, right.
And then we get this who's doing it, and they're also controlled and not looking at power, controlled by libidinal pleasure, but a very antisocial libidinal pleasure.
Yes.
And that's what's missing from Brave New World's depiction of that, I think. You can't have the self-centered libidinal behavior with a big placid social order. Because the big placid social order, it involves some commitment on the individual part to the social order, which
Yes.
is kind of in conflict with this idea of libidinal pleasure seeking. And so I liked that element of it as a dystopia that I think is not there in Brave New World. And then from the information space, there's just this bit where they're planning the Beninia thing, and Norman and Donald they're going over the reports from Shamalizer, and they're basically saying that like we can't make a decision about the Beninia project until I brief myself on all of the information on the Beninia project. But Shamalizer produces so much
So much they
information
can't keep up with it. Yeah.
that I can't. By the time I've briefed myself on the information
I'm
on the
out of
current
date.
situation, I'm out of date, and I can't. And I'm caught in this perpetual inaction that is brought about by this need to be up to date on the situation. That feeling in particular feels really like the moment, like the information space. This like restless need to update, this feeling that like there's never an ending, it's never been said, it's like always going rolling forward. That I feel like that vibe is what I find prescient coming away the second time,
Yes.
as
No,
opposed to
that's a good point.
the more like, named items that tend to come up when you see this book discussed.
So, I guess then I'll share my kind of concluding thoughts about it. As I said earlier, it's one of those books I really did hate that the big thematic ending, because again, but
yeah.
As anyone who's watched some of my other reviews of sci-fi, anytime it goes into genetic determinism, I'm kind of like, I'm out. So that's just how I am. I really hated that ending. But I thought it was very interesting. It's so well crafted in some places, and then it's very frustrating when in those little bits where I feel like, there's something missing. There's something I'm not getting here. There's something I'm not feeling. I think ultimately, though, I did feel quite removed and distant from the story. That might be because actually of this vibe you mentioned of this kind of libidinal apathy and this kind of giving up, which is not quite nihilism, which I would associate more with something like, neuromancer, cyberpunk, but it's kind of veering into that. And to me, it's like, where are the people fighting back? Where are the people resist? I guess Chad Mulligan kind of resists, but it feels a bit one-sided with what it chooses to show of humanity and human society within that context. And that is, it's a valid choice from a storytelling perspective. Like, again, it's a personal preference thing. It's just, I'm like, I don't know, for instance, with something like my favorite dystopian novel of all time and one of my favorite novels of all time across all categories, The Handmaid's Tale has this more, for me, personal, like I'm pulled into the story and I'm thinking, but I care as well. And there is a spark of hope despite everything that speaks more to me than something like this. Although in terms of dystopias, it's quite mild. It's a quiet dystopia, which again is both a good thing and a bad thing, because I think there is something missing to fully flesh out the world and its situation. So I'm very happy I read it.
It's so low sci-fi that we've like basically surpassed it in most
definitely. Definitely. It does have that little whiff of older SF.
Yeah.
Which is again not necessarily a bad thing. I've read enough older SF now to get that. Oh yeah. Also written by men. Again, no shade, but there is a bit that does factor in. So it's one of those books I'm happy I read once, at the very least. I'm happy I have it in my collection. For me it would have been a 7, but that ending I was just like, no. So for me it's a strong 6.5 out of 10 for me.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that you reread it as I read, because that's made it so much more fun to be able to discuss it with you, though.
Yeah, no, I had lots of fun talking today about this.
What would you rate? I mean, I don't know. I guess you don't really give ratings like I do, but
Yeah, no, I guess this is my first time giving a numbered rating for something.
7. I
I don't
feel
know.
like you're a little bit more positive on it than me.
I think I like more than you did, I think. It definitely does kind of drag in that middle bit. I like that kind of, well, just after the yeah, no, because like I doubt because it is one of these like it's definitely still one of the books you should read kind of
Yeah.
things, like canon wise.
I feel it feels quite distinct as a dystopian novel as well,
It
especially if you
does, yeah,
compare it to some of the other big names. It does. I'm like, oh yeah, this is very much its own thing. So I think it's definitely
yeah,
worthwhile reading in that respect as well.
yeah. Especially if you're looking for a dystopia that isn't, yeah, your standard story about a dystopia,
Yes,
about like the kind
absolutely.
of, you know, because you tend to get like a YA resistance kind of thing, or
That's
a
quite
more kind of like
bleak.
nihilistic,
Yes.
kind of like it's all over kind of thing. This is much more ambiguous, which I think works in
Yes,
its
it is more
favor.
ambiguous. I agree.
Yeah, and the Indonesian aspect of it too. I think it's an interesting time capsule too as a book,
It is very much.
you know.
I think you
And
probably got a lot more out of that aspect with your background in history too.
yeah, that might be a bit of a personal thing. But so you give it a what?
For me, it's a 6.5 out of
Okay,
10.
I guess a 7. Yeah, 7 out of 10 for me. That sounds about
Okay.
right.
Uh, great. Well, this
Yeah.
was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I hope we can do this again in the future.
yeah. I hope so too. This is great.
Great. Well, so thank you
Um,
for
yeah,
joining me today.
my
Um,
pleasure.
so my lovely boyfriend Christopher. Uh,
Yeah,
and on that very final note, I hope you enjoyed this review, found it interesting, entertaining, informative, just a
yeah.
pleasant way to pass the time. And on a very final
Also,
note, oh yeah,
the purple bookworm. She's far too proud to ever say it, but fucking smash that like button and pound that subscribe button so hard that your finger breaks. You know,
thank
you
you.
just gotta feel it. Wherever you're sitting. So kind of
what, what you
look
said?
up how far you are away from Belgium and kind of gauge it appropriately how hard you should hit the like button so she can feel it. But you should do it.
Oh, thank you. Again, my lovely boyfriend Christopher. So I hope you all have a lovely day, evening, whichever time of day you
Yes.
prefer. Do take
Goodbye.
care of yourselves. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video, whenever that is, and certainly in the future again with Christopher. So, but until then, bye.
Bye.